Couple of seconds early today, aren't I? Top of the morning to everybody. Yeah, there it is. My hat's a little dirty, isn't it? I was wearing it fishing last weekend. That's my excuse. Don't worry, I'll get another. I've got plenty. Driving into work this morning early, kind of dreary. I don't know that I realized that rain was in the forecast, but if you're looking for something to do today and you are in Eastern Maryland, if you're in Northern Virginia, if you're in South Central Pennsylvania or West Virginia, Hagerstown, Maryland, maybe, Winchester, Virginia, Chambersburg, PA, frankly, wherever you might be, why not go to Shippensburg? The brand new Parks Casino is what I'm thinking of. The all-new Parks Casino, less than an hour from Harrisburg, our state capital. Everything's going on there. 500 state-of-the-art slot machines, 48 live dealer electronic table games, blackjack, roulette, and more. You can bet sports on the Bet Park Sportsbook kiosks that are there. A lot of good grub, a lot of good stuff to do, a lot of fun. Get out of the inclement weather and enjoy yourself. Just off Interstate 81, the brand new Parks Casino. You got to be 21 for the casino. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Thank you, Shippensburg Parks Casino. Am I getting reflection today? Oh, you know what? Maybe it's because of the hat. How's that? Hello. So, gang, I said in the chat as we were just getting ready to get started, who was your favorite AM DJ? Did you grow up in the era and listen to AM radio? I mean, like back in the day. I think my earliest memory of AM radio would be Philly 56, WFIL. Philly 56 WFIL. And who do I remember? Whose name? Because I was just a young boy at the time. You know, I've got this vision of my parents driving the first new car they ever owned, which was a 66 Chevy Impala. Damn it, how did we get so old? A 66 Chevy Impala that did not have air conditioning. And when my brother and I would be driven by our parents on hot summer days, this is a true story, we would sometimes in the center of Doylestown, go into the center of town, and we would roll up the windows. Like, Mom, roll up the windows and let's act like we have air conditioning. Is that crazy? And we would do it. Like my mother, my saint of a mother and father, playing along with us so that we could act like we had air conditioning. Holy crap. Anyway, I doubt there was an FM radio in that car, right? It was probably only AM radio, and Philly 56 WFIL was the radio station that I think of. And the reason is, if you watch my Hulu special, I always forget to mention it. It's still out there. You can watch it. If you have Hulu, just say Smerconish. It's called Things I Wish I Knew Before I Started Talking. In my Hulu special, I tell the story and I show the album. Philly 56 WFIL put out an album in the late 60s of all the hits from a particular year. I can picture it. Maybe I'll even drop it in my social media. And they were all from different artists, including Todd Rundgren singing Hello, It's Me. Was it Todd Rundgren or would it have been Nash? I think it was Todd Rundgren from Upper Darby. So we used that album to make phony phone calls. And the way it would work is that my brother would make the call and he would call you up, like Prince Albert in a can style. He would call you up out of the phone book, like flipping through the phone book and coming up with names to call. And so we would here's is it Susan Engel? So my brother would call up and he would say, hello, Mrs. Engel? Yes, I'm in a band. I forget what the fake band name was, but we had a fake name, I'm sure. You're like, Mrs. Engel? We're in a band and we're rehearsing and we have a new song. And we just wondered if we could play a little bit of it for you and see what you think. And I'm sure Mrs. Engel or Mrs. Fletcher or Mrs. Coyle or, Mrs. Towden, just looking at some of the names on the board here, Mrs. Moran, knew it was a total gag. Like the gag was probably on us. So now my brother's got somebody that we think is a live wire ready to listen to our new band. And he would go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then my job, sitting at a turntable with the Philly 56 WFIL album, was to put the needle down at the beginning of the song. Now, I don't even know if it was the first song on the album, but you remember what it was like to try and like play just the beginning of maybe the third track on the album. You'd always go, and that always happened. So it was like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then ding, ding, hello, it's me. And then we would play a little bit of the song, and then I would taper it down, and it would be like, oh, Mrs. Coyle, what do you think of our song? And they're like, oh, it's great. Your guys are great. So what was I talking about? Oh, yeah, AM radio. So I'm going to do a commentary today on CNN about AM radio. It's really amazing that there's this effort afoot now to keep it because the auto manufacturers don't want it. And why don't they want it? Because nobody wants it. Nobody listens to it. So is it a battle worth fighting for? Now, the stated reason is that it interferes with the electric vehicles interfere with the AM signal. I don't buy that because the AM signal was already staticky to begin with. That was always part of the charm. I remember when I was on WPHT, the old CAU, and we had the Phillies, and that was like a big thing in our crown because the Phillies got hot and won the World Series in 2008. And those were great times for the radio station. I was doing mornings. The Phillies were winning the World Series. Life was good. They were making a lot of money. And then they moved the Phillies over to the FM band because I'm trying to remember what the hell happened here. I guess it was WIP not only had AM, but now had an FM position as well. So they moved the Phillies, and we kind of fooled ourselves thinking, oh, people are still going to want the static. They're going to want that classic feel, of listening to a ball game. But that was not the case. So AM skews old. Listeners just, don't want to. Now they're spoiled with SiriusXM and with podcasts and so on and so forth. So the auto manufacturers are not making cars with AM radios in them. Now comes, and it's a bipartisan effort. Ed Markey and Ted Cruz joining forces, I think, for different reasons. In Cruz's case, I'm sure it's political because they fear that the clubhouse is going to go away for AM listeners. Rush, when he was syndicated in 1988, saved AM radio because music listeners had flocked to FM. AM was struggling. Limbaugh saved it by giving conservatives a much-needed clubhouse where they could go and they could gather and hang with friends. But Russia's gone. Times have changed. I went back and forth with my friend Brian Rosenwald, who is the fellow that I often cite. He wrote the book on talk radio called Talk Radio's America, earned a PhD studying talk radio. And Brian made a good point to me, which is to say the content's not going to go away. Because it's not like when Rush came on in 88 and it was so unique. You could go to a place and be among conservatives and listen to a very entertaining conservative speaker. Now, there are lots of Limbaughs who are out there, and they're on all different platforms. So you're going to find that content elsewhere. It's just not going to be on AM radio. So I don't think it's going to be a body blow. I don't think it's going to be a body blow to the conservative movement. The other thing that I would say is that these radio stations saw it coming, and many of them migrated their talent, their content to the FM band in the same way of my Phillies example with the CBS now Odyssey stations. That's exactly what happened. KYW News Radio. I'm embarrassed. Oh no, TC did tell me. Right. So KYW News Radio, another local example, 1060. She said she still listens to it on AM for nostalgic reasons, but it's on the FM band. Well, why would you listen to it on the AM band? Apart from the reason for nostalgia, which would frankly wear off, I think, in a hurry. Anyway, it's a really great subject, and it will be tomorrow's poll question. it will be tomorrow's poll question, but I'm going to get into it on CNN today. And did you see the thumbnail for this brief conversation, Save the Static? I don't think that's what they're calling their campaign, but that was the first thing I thought of. And then a funny thing happened yesterday on radio because I was talking about this and I looked up at the call board, and based on the description, I said, I know that person. It was an old friend of mine from my hometown, Joe Conti, who was calling in. Joe had a successful political career. He was in the state Senate, and now he runs the Pennsylvania Broadcasters or Broadcast Association, whatever the proper title is. And, Joe wants to save AM radio. We had a nice conversation and shared a lot of memories on this subject. So, I'm curious. I'll read your comments later. I'm going to drop the Geeter's name on CNN today. How could I not? I mean, when you think of Philly and you think of DJs, doesn't the boss with the hot sauce, fit the description of what I'm talking about? So, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Anybody else? Rick Dees, WHBQ here in Memphis, says Valerie Fitzgerald. Jim, dislike the AM stations that dialed down their signal after sundown. Right. Ken Garland. Okay, Julia, I remember Ken Garland. Yeah, that dialing down, they're daytimers. There are a lot of, many people don't know this, but a lot of AM radio stations are powered only by sunlight. I don't mean that they're relying on sunlight. I mean that when the sun sets, they power down. The radio station where I was in Philly, the old WCAU, was a clear channel signal, 50,000 watts clear channel, which means they never powered down. So when the others would power down, our signal was enhanced and it bounced all over the Eastern Seaboard. I remember it was always like a really big thrill for me to take a non-Philly call. Like somebody calling in from Maryland or Virginia, like, wow, hey, that's really cool. So, Soupy Stales? Christopher, you listen to it during your lunch breaks, huh? WIBG, right, Wibbage. KMOX in St. Louis, says Robert Stutz. Still, right? Sid Mark. Yeah, absolutely. Sid Mark. Fridays with Frank, Sunday. But see, the thing about Sid is, Sid's home base was WWDB. And that was an FM talker. That's why I was thinking about Sid and I was thinking about the old DB days, which I love to discuss. But we were unique in that we were an FM talk radio station. Right. Harvey says Sid was always an FM guy till he came to PHT. That's right. College and universities often broadcast sports games on AM radio. Yeah, well, that's true. In fact, in my town, and I talked about this with my friend Joe Conti yesterday, the radio station was WBUX, 1570 AM. And the sports announcer, I told this on radio yesterday, was Roger Conduit. And Roger was like a really big guy with a very unique voice. And it was such a thrill if Roger were calling one of your games and you got mentioned, like, oh, he mentioned me. MLB was always on AM radio, says Robert. Yeah, that's true. You still get Bloomberg on 1130. Big Roger on BUX, says Bob Starner. You remember him, right? Yeah, of course. He was like a town fixture, right? Cousin Brucey, WABC, Art Bell, funny. Irv Homer moved to WBCB. Right, that's right. Doesn't Merrill Reese own that radio station? Oh, God, I could talk about this forever. Fabrizio. Carl Haas, PBS WUSF. Harry Harrison. Right, I know that radio name, even though that's a New York guy. Harry Harrison. Good radio name, by the way. Was Don Cannon, before he was on OGL, was he on Wibbage? I don't know. High Lit. Yes, Harvey. High Lit, sure. George Michael, WFIL. George Michael was another big name. And Dr. Donald D. Rose. I wish I had that album with me. You can sing the Harry Harrison song, really? Murray the K, Jim Bohannon. Yes, Don Cannon was on Wibbage. I thought so. It's funny, Don Cannon, so many of these guys changed their names. Joe Niagara, right. Wolfman Jack. I think Wolfman Jack was in the Southwest. I think Wolfman Jack was on the Mexico-Texas border towns. Hey, I lost track of time. I want to say one other thing, if I may. The poll question today. I don't know if it requires explanation or not. Is Gen Z's work-life balance brilliant or bonkers? There's a really great piece that I had posted, I think, yesterday at Smerconish.com and on the newsletter by Susie Welsh. Susie Welsh, who's a business professor at NYU. Susie Welsh, who is Jack Welch's widow. He, of course, the GE giant. But it really struck a chord because I'd never heard the expression fun employment, which means have fun while you're unemployed. And she talks about her students and some of what she has heard from them. Here's an example. I have a friend who runs a large media company and employs an army of Gen Zers. We often exchange dispatches from the front. She tells me about the young editor who left a meeting with the explanation, "I have to go meet the plumber." I tell her about the student who reported her homework would be late because she was attending a Harry Styles concert. In our day, we agreed we'd never have skipped out of work midday or missed a deadline, or at least we'd have come up with a better excuse. But after she kind of pillories Gen Z and their approach to work, she says maybe they have the better idea. I wonder, were the old days so good after all? I spent decades working 7 days a week if you count answering emails during my son's wrestling matches and dictating client memos at birthday parties, and never took a real vacation, or at least one without bouts of panic and guilt. I know I'm not alone. My cohort wore this life like a badge of honor. I assume that's a reference to Jack Welch. We won't have a verdict until we see how Gen Z's values play out for their lives. Until then, I'll be left mulling whether fun employment and Gen Z's other innovations are brilliant or bonkers. Maybe I'm asking it about the wrong generation after all. Maybe they have the right idea, because I'm in her category, with my schedule. My wife is the same. That's the way our house has always been. But, maybe in the end, we didn't do it the right way. Brilliant or bonkers, those Gen Zers? I'm going to go get my noggin powdered. I hope I see you on television today. Sorry, I'm just totally caught up. Howard Stern and Don Imus on WNBC. All right, see ya. Go vote at Smerconish.com, will you please? Have a great day. Give TC some play on TC After Dark. See ya.